But if the next administration does not change the policies on Cuba, my respect, admiration for this country will be significantly diminished. How can a global superpower continue to impose these draconian sanctions on a country like Cuba? To induce what? To induce political changes. When I saw Condi Rice landing in Tripoli, I thought, well, maybe next he's going to land in Cuba as well. Cuba has never had any intention of producing nuclear weapons, not even nuclear energy. Is it because of human rights? Well, if it's because of human rights, there will be few countries in Asia, in the Middle East, that the US would have relations with. It was John McCain, whom I met in the past, twice at least, in Washington. Every time I went to Washington and asked to see him, he promptly agreed to receive me. And it was John McCain, prisoner of Vietnam, victim of torture while prisoner, that initiated, that championed the normalization of relations with Vietnam. So why not this administration, or at least the next, initiate normalization of relations with Cuba? What it has been done to Cuba has been a bit too much already. My country is a newly emerging country, 1 million people, and we, by act of God, we became a small oil and gas exporting country soon after our independence. Still very small. It will increase in the next 5, 10, 20 years. But now we receive our revenues from oil and gas is about 150 to 200 million a month. For a country of a million is not bad. Compared with Kuwait, it's peanuts. But we have already started to help others. We donated $500,000 to Cuba because of the Cyclone Ike, $500,000 to Myanmar through the ASEAN Secretariat in Indonesia, $500,000 to China, direct to the Chinese government for the Sichuan earthquake. And next year, we will budget $1 million a year for UNICEF and UNHCR to do programs in Somalia, where very little attention is paid to, and for work for UNICEF in Myanmar. That is our small contribution. As I watch the US elections, I really don't have an opinion who is better, or for the US, Americans are the ones who will decide, and whether it is what will be the impact on Timor-Leste, depends on who the president-elect. Well, I told a friend of mine, a US ambassador, I don't cite his name, he came to see me last year when I came to the UN, asking me to Timor-Leste to vote with the US on some resolution. I don't remember even one. I told him, sarcastically, with my often silly sense of humor, I told him, Joseph, do you realize that your aid to Timor-Leste has been dwindling, and so is your influence? Well, he retorted, he also has great sense of humor, he retorted and said, well, I remember a Timorese personality came to Washington recently, and he said he would no longer lobby the US Congress for more money because he was sympathetic to US difficulties with Katrina, Afghanistan, Iraq. What happened was, in the past, the US Congress, every year the US administration decides about aid to different countries. And aid to Timor was reduced from 2002, 25 million to 13 million. The Office of Budget Management, the ones that make those decisions, simply decided that Timor-Leste, in terms of its population, was receiving too much aid from the United States. I had a conversation with the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, expressing my disappointment. I told him, but do you realize, Secretary of State, I'm going to Congress and I'm going to get this money put back? And he said, yes, I know. And, well, I would go to the US Congress, talk to Patrick Leahy, Senator Kennedy, John McCain, any number of Nita Lowey, Nancy Pelosi, all of them. And true enough, the US Congress put back the money for us, 25 million. But at the time I did. So my point is only to illustrate that today we are financially self-sufficient. 100% of the budget financed by ourselves through our petroleum money. We still receive a lot of aid in terms of foreign assistance. The largest assistance comes from Australia, 100 million a year. Second, I think, would be European Commission. Third would be Japan. Fourth would be Portugal, and many other countries. We have a functioning democracy with 7 political parties in parliament, in spite of the crisis we went through in 2006, where I was foreign minister, then had to take over as defense minister without understanding anything about military issues. But I was the only person they said that the military would accept. Then 2 weeks later, had to take over as prime minister as well. It was not in my plan. And 2007, I was elected president of my country. In spite of the crisis, all the constitutional process were followed through. No violation of the Constitution. Since 2002, we have signed ratified every international human rights instrument. Ratify them and comply with them in terms of reporting to the Secretary General, to the committees, the treaty bodies in Geneva. The country today is at peace with much international assistance, particularly from Australia, New Zealand, and of course the United Nations. Next year, we will witness a new U.S. administration taking office, whether John McCain or Barack Obama. It opens a new extraordinary opportunity for the United States. I don't subscribe to the many sweeping judgments about the United States or even about the Bush administration. I have told friends on the Democratic side that while we all love President Bill Clinton, the reality is that the Clinton administration did not do that much, did a lot for my country and a few others, but in terms of development assistance, in particular for HIV and the malaria, it was the Bush administration that did the most, and very little has been acknowledged. But if you talk to Bob Geldof, who is totally neutral, at least on this, he also acknowledged in an interview in Time magazine, he said, in terms of aid to Africa, HIV, malaria, the work of the Bush administration has been exceptional. But in other areas, because of the confrontational style, particularly in the beginning of the mandate of the administration, it has created these extraordinary bad feelings around the world. However, the world also tends to be often unfair. When the US intervened in Bosnia and Kosovo, we heard little appreciation. When it intervened in Iraq and got rid of Saddam Hussein, it was savage in criticism all over the world. The reality is, if you look at the media today, Saddam Hussein is not there, and the people of Iraq, after several years of violence since the intervention, enjoying a period of relative peace at the moment. How fragile, how steady it is, we will see.